Ramplifi, the podcast, is filmed and recorded in Victorville, California. This podcast is made possible with the support of the Associate Student Body of Victor Valley College. The views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Victor Valley College or its affiliates.
This episode of Ramplifi discusses domestic violence, a topic that may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Please be advised that sensitive details are included in the discussions you are about to hear. If you or someone you know is affected by domestic violence, resources and support information are available in the podcast description.
Support for Ramplifi comes from Victorville Cadillac, offering a selection of new and pre-owned Cadillac vehicles. More information about Victorville Cadillac's latest inventory is available at vvcadillac.com.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
Hello once again. You are streaming Ramplify, the podcast, brought to you by the Associated Student Body right here at Victor Valley College. I'm your host for this episode, Andrew Caravella, Media Relations Coordinator here at VVC. Also, thank you for watching exclusively through the free VVC mobile app. If you're on the go and listening to the audio version of the show, thank you for streaming on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app. This is a pretty serious episode. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we decided to take a step back from our normal staff and student spotlights and do a different type of spotlight. Sitting with me here today is faculty member Leslie. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's Murillo.
Murillo.
Or Murillo, depends.
How do you pronounce it when you're introducing yourself?
Murillo.
Murillo.
Yeah.
Okay. Leslie Murillo. How long have you taught at VVC?
Geez, I'm going on 4 years now.
4 years?
4 years. Yeah.
You were a student here, actually, also.
Yes, I was. I'm very proud of that.
Alumni. Yeah.
Alumni, yes.
Yeah. Leslie, you are a domestic violence survivor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you so much for sitting here to share your story with us today for this special edition of Ramplify for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So just thank you before we begin.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and put this away. I don't really know how this is going to run for, the next several minutes, but I'm just going to I guess have you start at the beginning on your life and how that all happened for you.
So do you want me to start from when I started BBC, or do you want me to start from
I guess for you,
how it works?
I guess for you, when did domestic violence occur in your life?
So I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Just in a newer relationship in my 30s. And it hit me pretty quickly. I want to say with the first 2 months of dating, I was already experiencing and exposed to domestic violence. And it's nothing I ever experienced before. I just thought, this individual had like a, hot temper, that it was just a one-time occurrence, especially at 2 months in. And, and then it progressed. And then by the time 6 months I was into this relationship, it was too hard to get out of within the first 6 months.
You felt trapped?
Oh, 100% trapped. 100% trapped. And then, I've never had anyone put their hands on me like that. I've never had anyone stalk me like that. I never had anyone like obsessively, I don't know how to put it, love me that way. I guess that's a great way to put it. Their definition of love was something that I wasn't used to because it was so aggressive and so, back and forth and good. It would be good. And then it would be like violent. And then it was just so back and forth. And it was really hard to get out of.
From a journalistic standpoint, because that's my background, it sounds toxic.
Yeah, super toxic, from the start. And it was something that I had been exposed to before. And, I'm just such a caring person. And I think my personality really kind of hindered me in a way because I'm like, if I just cared about this person, they'll one day wake up and see they don't need to be like that with me.
Okay, so based on what you just said, would you say that you felt like you were a fixer?
Oh yeah. Not like I could change this person or I could fix them. I just figured that this person needed extra love. Like they had come from an environment that didn't have that kind of love. They came from an environment that, foster youth and shuffled around a lot, and
So you had compassion for their upbringing.
Yeah, and I think that compassion. I was like, okay, well, there's no emotional intelligence there. Maybe I could help them find it. But by the time a year had rolled by, I was in such a dangerous predicament and freshly pregnant towards the end of that year that I found myself in a very, how do I put it? More than a toxic state. Like now it was life or death.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was really hard to get out of.
And this whole time you were a student at VVC or right?
No,
right,
this was before. So
okay.
I didn't become a student here at VVC until after I left Shelter. I entered Shelter in 2013 of January, and I had met this particular person back in 2010.
Okay.
So before I had gotten into Shelter, there was about 3 years there that was just this vicious cycle of violence. And when I came to VVC, like I said, I was fresh out of Shelter. I went to the House of Ruth, got out, came up here, got part of the Better Way program for transitional living, and started my whole new life of trying to reestablish myself. And that's when all that occurred.
I want to take a step back real quick because you mentioned that during the beginning when you had gotten pregnant. After you had your child, tell us what domestic violence looked like after you had a kid in the relationship.
It didn't change.
Right.
It didn't change much, but I had children back to back. So I had Corey in 2012, and then I had Adrian in 2013, and it was nonstop back to back. It never really stopped.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Did you feel that having children may have made it better?
No.
Okay.
You mean like less?
Like did you think at some point that, just kind of understanding your story, that maybe by having kids this would lighten everything?
Oh no. I thought maybe he would come to the realization that now there's children involved, it would be different.
Okay.
When you have children, I always think that it's like a sacred thing to have a child, and women's body go through so much when they have children. I thought one day he would see that, oh my gosh, she had my children. Let me be better for her and by her. But I didn't have children just for that. But definitely it was something that in the back of my head, I'm thinking like one day, hopefully he wakes up and sees.
But that wasn't the case.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So after having kids, so you said 2013, and then you started college.
Yes, so I started college in January of 2013. No, I lied. That was when I went to Shelter.
Okay.
So when I got out of Shelter in March, I enrolled into college to start that August. So August of 2013 is when I started here.
So 2 kids, domestic violence relationship,
yes,
and brand new in college.
Yes. I have 2 kids prior to that, though. So there's 4 kids.
In this relationship, and you're all living under one roof.
Yes.
So what was that like, adding college onto the relationship while domestic violence was going on?
Well, I didn't start college till after that.
Okay.
So, finding myself after domestic violence and coming here was very hard for me because, for one, when you're in a domestic violence relationship, you don't have friends. They cut you off from life. So like my only friend was him at one point. He was the only one I was allowed to talk to. It became very...
So it's not that your friends abandoned you. It was that you were being trapped?
Yes and no.
Okay. No.
It's really hard to say because, when you're going through domestic violence, I think a lot of times people know something's going on, but they don't know quite what's going on. And, individuals lose patience. Mm-hmm. And everybody has their own personal boundaries. There's only so much that they can tolerate. Like, why is she not around? Oh, she lets him control her life. Like, I don't got time for that. Like, they move on. And they kind of just leave you behind, not realizing what's going on. And a lot of times, too, nobody really knew what was going on. They didn't know the extent of it. They didn't know the things that had happened. And that didn't come out till later on, until court. But they just thought that I was choosing this guy over my friendship, my families and stuff. And it wasn't that. It was just I chose to stay closer to him because I knew what he was capable of and the threats that he had at the time towards my family.
Did your did your children ever witness any of the violence going on between you two?
I don't, not until the last incident, and I wouldn't say witness, but my oldest daughter was upstairs when the last fight ever between us, I guess, went down. But she was upstairs with the little ones when it did, and she could hear everything, but she didn't witness it. So I got lucky on that because my two oldest children, when my two oldest children went to, would come over, they were, on week-to-week basis. So the weeks they were there, it was very calm. And the weeks that they were with their father, it was like chaos and mayhem. So he was very specific about the times that he would hurt me because he was afraid the other children were going to say something.
Wow. Your previous relationship, so he knew nothing about what was going on in your current relationship at all?
Nothing until the very end.
What was, because I'm assuming aside from the physical abuse, there must have been major emotional abuse going on also. Could you give us some examples of what that might have looked like?
So, gosh, everything you think of, really. And it wasn't just emotional, it was very verbal. Okay. And I think a lot of times too, when we think of domestic violence, we think of just physical. We don't realize that mental and emotional abuse, name calling, telling them that no one's going to love you anymore and you're nobody, and look at your family, they've abandoned you and nobody wants you, and here I am for you. You start to think that they're right because people do leave. And then you get stuck into that vicious cycle. And I think a lot of times too, in domestic violence, that nonverbal stays with you. It's a constant. It runs through your mind over and over and over again. And then you start to believe it. And I think that was a lot for me, is well, he's right. My family has moved away. I have lost all my friends. Maybe he is all I have. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I think a lot of times when you're put in those situations, that verbal and emotional abuse is such a manipulative tool that they have to you that before you know it, you start believing it. Even if you are the strongest willed person. Because I used to think I was, a pretty strong willed person. And then he came along and I was like, oh, I'm not.
Listening to you though, there's strength in your voice, and at some point, you must have said enough is enough and changed your situation. So what was the moment that it all changed for you?
I think one of the most,
I have tissues.
It's okay. I think for me, the moment that changed everything was the moment my oldest daughter was in the house, because that particular situation was not just against me and him. There was a third party. And it's something that was very interesting to me because I think, when you're in these domestic violence situations or these relationships, you always think it's between you and this person. And you really are in denial thinking this person loves me so much. They just have temperament problems. It's okay that, you get that cycle of violence and you think they really do love me. They'll, at the end of the day, they love me. And then this was the particular time when it was 2-on-1. And I was fighting for my life. Having two people brutally beat you in your home over something very silly was kind of the breaking point with me. And I saw how it affected my daughter. And even after this scenario, the second person involved in that altercation, they left because of my brother-in-law at the time got that person to leave, but he stayed. So we spent a whole weekend, basically prisoner in our own home until I could convince him to leave and stuff like that. But I'll never forget the drive taking her back to her father's that weekend after all that occurred and just promising her this is not going to happen again. I'm gonna fight for you more than anything. And just seeing how she, was looking at me, because by that time, my lip was ripped in 3 places. I had black eyes and I was brutally beaten all over my body. And those are things I couldn't hide because she was there at the times, and makeup doesn't do justice. So I think that was the turning point when I finally realized that I am going to die, because now he's allowing someone else to put their hands on me. And it was no big deal. And that's when it kind of clicked for me.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
You had told me, when we were talking about this off the record, that, there was drugs and alcohol and other stuff that was related to some of the physical abuse that had gone into some of his actions and stuff.
And the
addictions.
He did have a pretty severe addiction back then. However, I have to put out there that the brutality of the violence got less. It was, how do I put this? It was less often than it was before because he was chasing the high. So he would, chase the high instead of, hurting me.
So when he was less addicted, when he was more sober or clean, I guess is what I'm saying, is when the violence was more?
In a sense, yes. Like, I don't know how to explain this correctly, but like it was more often when he was sober because he had more attention to like me and what I was doing. When he was out in the streets looking for drugs or being high, he was around less. So he hurt me less. Like on a daily basis, but there would be like the big times that would go down, stuff would go down. I guess
we censor everything.
Okay, you're fine. I'm sorry. I was like, but yeah, no. So him being on drugs definitely, caused huge conflict and violence, but not as often as in the beginning, which I always find that very interesting. And I always just assume it was because he was chasing the high and he was chasing the drugs and he was on the streets doing his own thing. But it definitely played a huge part in what he was doing.
So when you got the courts and law enforcement involved and you started going through the legal process, what did that look like for you?
That was very difficult too because, through all the years of going through what we went through, I never had enough nerve to call law enforcement, and it wasn't right away. So after the situation that occurred,
where you were beaten,
I didn't call law enforcement right away.
How long did you wait?
Next day, because that was on a Sunday, and then Monday morning I went into the EOP office here at VBC, and I had my sunglasses on. Oh, wow. And I was brutally because you couldn't cover my black eyes. And I walked into EOP and CalWorks because I was a student at CalWorks. And I walked into CalWorks, and the minute I got there, they knew something was wrong because, I frequent there often.
Okay.
And I pulled down my hoodie and my glasses, and they whisked me in the office really quickly. And I think her name was Veronica Marquez. Mm-hmm. She was the federal work study person that worked in the office. She talked to me because I went to talk to Melanie Price, and talked to her because I was so worried about missing class, and I was so worried about my college education and the financial aid and like what to do next because I was kind of like frazzled about everything. I walked into their office and they asked if I was okay, if I was safe, and they really encouraged me to make a police report and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I will. I just didn't want to miss my class. I was so worried about missing class, and I was so worried about my grades. That was like my main focus, which is crazy if you think about it now.
Yeah.
Like, why are you worried about, should worry about your life, not grade. And I went to Frank Foster's class. God bless Frank Foster. He's a great professor here. I went to his class, and his class was canceled. And I took it as a sign. Like, okay, it's your time. So no more excuses. And then I went to the hospital. I got checked out. The hospital called the police department, and the police took forever to get there. So I just thought that like I was not a priority. So I went back home, grabbed some clothes, went to go stay with my sister, and then the cop called me, and we met up at a park, in like a parking lot of a park, and I filed a report with them. It was probably the most panic-driven 24 hours of my life because it's so much going on in that moment, and I was already in transitional living, so I was already in domestic violence protection at that moment. So that was another nerve-wracking thing because I was afraid of what would happen with that. Like, oh, he found me. I'm in the program. Like, oh, it was a lot. So I filed a police report. I notified the Better Way. I let them know what happened. They took photos. The police did a report, which was complex, but it was a lot. And then then they said, okay, and then we'll get into contact with you. And then the DA contacted me. Then we went through pre-trial, which was horrific. That was such a horrific experience in itself. So traumatized. Like, I still think about it and I'm traumatized from it. Just because it's so much you're revealing about the situation in open court, which things that I've, like, my family didn't know, things that, like, you have to admit, you know, I've been stabbed 8 times in the ribs with a fork. Like, I had to admit that in open court. If you look at me real carefully, I don't have a bridge to my nose because he broke it. If you look at my face real carefully, I did my makeup really good today, but when you look at me really carefully, I have 2 permanent black eyes. This one is sunk in more because he was left-handed, and my face is not aligned. My jaw's been broken twice. My ribs have been cracked. So there's a lot to it that I had to, you know, admit in open court. Like, I've been pushed out of moving cars in front of traffic. Like, those kinds of things that came out in court were really hard at the time. And, you know, you're saying that stuff in front of your mother. You're saying that stuff in front of friends. You're saying that stuff in front of, you know, people who love you that didn't know that this was the ramification of what you were going through. So it was a very difficult time back then, for sure.
Did you feel shame
I think
during that time?
I don't know if it was so much shame. It was just kind of like bewilderness. Like, how did I get myself in this predicament? How did it let it go for so long? People do enough to shame you, to be honest. People shame me still for it every single day. They're like, you shoulda, coulda, woulda. And I think a lot of times what people don't understand is when you're in these relationships and you're in this cycle of violence, you know how dangerous this person is and you know what they're capable of because they've made good on what they've said. So you always feel like you have to have protection from others because they threaten to, like, for instance, this individual threatened to hurt my family. And I knew what he did to me. I was so terrified that was going to be inflicted on the family that he used that as a manipulation tactic. So I think a lot of times too, it's not about so much I shame myself. It was just knowing that it's okay. You got yourself out of it and it's going to get better. So I never really felt a sense of shame. Maybe disappointment is a good word because I should have got out sooner. For sure, but I feel like I did what I needed to do at the time I needed to do it. The bravery came later, I guess you could say.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
You told me after court that you guys still had a co-parent.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. LA County.
Yeah.
LA County gave him, when I was in shelter, LA County gave him custody or partial custody of the kids. And when he went to jail, I could have fought that, but I was in such a different mind space. I didn't want to have to dread up and go to court over something. I didn't know how long. I mean, I figured he would mess up and just stay longer in jail. But at some point, I realized he was going to get out. And at some point, I knew that he was going to want a relationship with his kids. So at some point, I needed to figure out how to navigate that and how to deal with that.
You used the word, we're going to use it here on the podcast because that's the word you used with me several times, amicable.
Amicable, yeah.
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 Tell me about that.
So, when he got out of prison, I had to figure out how to be amicable because you have to make a choice at this time. Like, can I stew in my fear or my, I don't want to say hatred because I hate that word, but there's a lot of tension there between this person and you.
Right, because after everything you've shared with me, I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I could not
do
it.
And I'm gonna be really honest. A lot of people didn't understand at the time, like, why are you being amicable with this person?
You are instantly a better person than I am. Like, that's. Like, I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about this right now because that is...
Because you have to put, like, after...
It's hurtful what he did to you.
Yeah, it's super hurtful. It's painful. And, when he got out, just hearing his voice would set me, into a frenzy. Like, especially if he raised it, I would be like, right? So I think, like, at one point, I really had a conversation with myself and say, Leslie, what do you want to do? What are you going to do? Do you want to keep harboring all this hatred and all this resentment and all this, like, fear towards this individual, or do you want to be brave? Do you want to be strong? Do you want to be a badass? I guess I don't know how to put that, but like, do you want to be brave about this? So I had to really think about it, and I said, no, I think I could be amicable. I think I could work at it. It's gonna take a minute, and people are not gonna understand you. But that's what I went with within my heart. Like I prayed on it and prayed on it and prayed on it, and I realized like, nope, you got to let go and let God, and that's kind of how I went with that. It was not easy. It was not always successful in the very beginning, but we found our way, and we're very amicable to this day. Very much so.
To your knowledge, is he clean, sober? He's
been sober. He's been clean. He's doing fantastic. He lives in another state.
That sounds good.
Yeah, his life is phenomenal. I'm very proud of him, about how he's uplifted his life, especially in the last year and a half, and the things that he's doing. We can have amicable conversations, and he'll call me about things that are going on in his life. And he just had 2 new boys, and my kids are now have siblings, and we keep in contact, and they see their siblings. So
I'm all about normalizing when we talk about like mental health.
Yeah.
I advocate for that, and you do the same from what you've told me, and you do share your story with your classes and stuff.
I do. I think it's very important, especially the classes that I teach. I teach interpersonal communication and family communication, and I think it's really important in my classes to share a lot about my personal experience, because you never know what the next student's going through or what they've lived through. And I realized the more transparent I am about certain things in my life, you could see the difference in the student. The students will connect with you, that they share a lot with me. I have students who share all kinds of things.
More than you anticipate.
More than I anticipate. And I'm all for it. I think that there's such a rich, beautiful connection that students get to, share that with me. And I'm very honored that they share that with me, because some of these things, it's secondary trauma. I'm reading about all kinds of stuff. So, and I think it's a beautiful thing, because if they could see that I've overcome these obstacles and I'm in such a beautiful place, and come back to an institution that really did raise me up. I think it's really important, because when I was going through domestic violence, I took family communication. That's how I changed my major.
Yeah.
Jennifer Fowley was teaching it, and she was just such a beautiful professor and a beautiful soul, and she really connected with me. And she listened to all my stuff with what I was going through, and I wanted to give back and do the same thing, and I changed my major. And I said when I was going to come back to VBC, I was going to do that, and here I am. So I really try to be transparent with my students and offer them like, hey, I'm the most non-judgmental person. What do you got? Come tell me.
And you have gone above and beyond. Haley, could you give me that flyer next to the keyboard? You actually have even created thank you. You even created a scholarship here. Tell us a little bit about this.
So I started 2 scholarships. One is the Leslie Kallenich Resilient Scholarship. That's for individuals who are survivors of domestic violence. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are, you could be a child, right? A child that survived or witnessed it, or there's not specific. You don't have to be actually a victim of it, but you could be a child who witnessed it, right? So that I started that one, and then I started the Kallenich Second Start Scholarship, and this is for reentry students, adult learners. When I came back to school, I was like 36, 37. It was a very unique experience for me, being an adult learner and coming back and trying to navigate my way. Most times I was older than any student in the classroom. And I just remember being hurting for money, because, I was on cachet and welfare back then, because I just got out of shelter. I walked away for my whole life. I didn't have a penny to my name. So I wanted to start these scholarships. They mean so much to me. They're $1,000 each. And I just thought it would be a beautiful way to give back to an institution that kind of gave me my life back.
We have several ASB officers actually here today. Do you guys have any questions for
Ask me.
For Leslie at all?
Don't be
shy. You guys
shy.
Just observing? It's okay if you guys don't. It's been kind of intense in here today.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is currently going through domestic violence?
Oh, okay.
One piece of advice.
Just one. I think the one thing I always tell individuals who are still going through it is that you get out when you, because there's going to be times where you're trying to leave and you kind of get sucked back in. And, a lot of times our victims give up on themselves because they're like, I'm never going to be able to leave. So I think the best advice I can give you is keep trying, keep going. One day, I think it took me at least 15 times before, I left and came back. So I think there's just that one last time. So believe in yourself, make a plan. Believe, there's, oh God, I'm trying to think of just like one specific thing, but I think just be brave and know when your time is your time to leave. I think that, your safety, make a plan, and don't do it when everyone else thinks that you need to do it. Do it when you know that it's right. And sometimes we don't know when it's right, but I think that's a double edge. But I really do think that there's going to be a moment that you're going to have absolute faith in not knowing the outcome, and you just have to be brave enough to take it. I don't know if that was good.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think another way I can translate that is, I had a background working in mental health and drug addiction when I was pursuing show business, had to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I worked in rehabs. And what I learned about addiction is people can't help themselves. You can only help people that want to help themselves.
Yes.
And when we talk about addiction, you don't really get clean and sober until you've hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
So to your point, I think what you're trying to say is when someone feels like that they've hit rock bottom, that's when they make the choice to get the help that they want.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, when you, like for me personally, when domestic violence started, it happened so quickly. It was like I lost myself and didn't know how to get it back. It was almost like instantaneous, 2-on-1. All of a sudden, the girl that got lost years ago, she was there. And all of a sudden, the bravery was there and the conviction was there. And I went with it. I said, okay, she's back. Like, I'm going to go with this. So I think there's those moments where we might have that opportunity to feel ourselves again and take that step. But you have to really be at the point when you're ready to leave, it, like 100% and not go back. I think that's the best I can do with that.
Go ahead, Shania.
How have you navigated that healing process?
It's been a long one, for sure. It wasn't overnight. I think right now I'm such in a beautiful place. Who else can be amicable with I don't recommend that for everybody, but we're in such a good place, and, I can have conversations with him at this point. So I think for me, for healing, it was finding my voice again and taking it back. And a lot of times too, especially when I was here at VBC, a lot of my family wanted me not to talk about it anymore. A lot of my friends are like, when are you going to get over this? Like, this happened to you. Okay, great. But when are you going to move forward?
And again, that's not normalizing.
No. And that's again, someone suppressing your voice. And
yes.
So what I did is, in order to heal, I put myself in the most uncomfortable positions, had the most uncomfortable conversations, not just with me, but with him. And I wouldn't be quiet. I was going to tell my story to whoever wanted to hear it. My classrooms are great because, they're stuck in the seats. But there's, I did a lot of advocacy outside of that. I've done a lot of advocacy at Cal State San Bernardino. I've done workshops here about domestic violence. I think the more that I'm able to speak on my story, I think it's so much healing, because I'm not ashamed of it. I'm actually kind of proud of it. It's the best, worst thing that has ever happened to me. Right? Because now
and look at it this way.
Yeah.
If your story saves just one more person in their situation, then you had to go through that in order for somebody else's life to be saved.
And that's huge. So I'm all about that for sure. For sure.
Oh. Go ahead.
As someone that has witnessed people close in my life go through domestic violence, how does someone like me support those that are going through it?
This is a hard one, because I know that everyone has boundaries and has limits, and they're, it's always disheartening because, I'm an advocate, and trying to get someone to get out of abusive relationship is very complex, because again, you want what's best for them. I think the best that for advocacy we can do is just be there when they need us. And that's hard, because we want them to leave right away. We want them to take themselves out of this equation. We can do all kinds of things, get support for them. There's a couple times when I've advocated for other victims where I've literally set up everything that they've needed, and they just needed to take that next step, and they couldn't. And it's like, right? But guess what? I'm still going to be there. I'll answer that phone call next time you call, and we'll do it again. And I'm going to do it until you take that next step. So I think it's just being consistent and persistent, and being supportive. Never tell them, well, you should have, could have, would have. I think that's another huge thing, because we're already getting shamed by our abusers. They're already telling us that we couldn't, we can't, we da. So I think, just being a staple in their life, as hard as that is, that's what's key to the next person's survival in an abusive relationship.
Leslie, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Of course. Of course.
We'll be right back here on Ramplify. Don't go away. Support for Ramplify comes from Victorville Cadillac, offering new and pre-owned Cadillac vehicles with financing options, including pre-approval available. More information about Victorville Cadillac's latest inventory is at vvcadillac.com.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
This episode of Ramplify discusses domestic violence, a topic that may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Resources and support info are available in the podcast description.
In 2023, California law enforcement agencies handled 160,357 domestic violence-related calls. That's about 6.1 calls per 1,000 adults, ages 18 to 69. Now, although the total number of domestic violence calls has dropped since 2001, incidents involving aggravated assault, which often include weapons or serious bodily harm, have risen sharply in recent years. That's according to the Public Policy Institute of California. Now, to put that in perspective, over 160,000 domestic violence calls a year means cops get repeated exposure to these hostile situations. I have with me Corporal Mike Schlegel from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. He's been with the Sheriff's Department for over a decade. Mike, I want to thank you for being here today on Ramplify. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Representing the Sheriff's Department today, I had some questions about domestic violence pertaining to law enforcement. First, your experience on the job. What does a typical domestic violence call look like from the moment dispatch comes through?
Unfortunately, there's no typical domestic violence call. Everything's a little bit different. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. So a lot of times the radio calls will come out saying there's some sort of verbal disturbance or an unknown problem. So we have to go into it keeping an open mind, not knowing what we're walking into or driving into, depending on where it's happening. So we just need to make sure that we can address it once we get on scene and use the facts that what we've seen and what we hear and through our interviews to determine whether it is actually a domestic violence call.
Now, I know law enforcement, you guys see everything under the sun, right? And then some. So mental health, because there's a huge push in our country for, mental health awareness. I'm a huge advocate for mental health awareness. How do you mentally prepare when responding to these type of calls? Because you never know what you're getting when you actually take a call.
Right. It's actually a little difficult sometimes, depending on what comes out over the radio. If it comes out as just some sort of mild argument, we just kind of prepare like, okay, what are we looking at? What are the possibilities? It could come out as some sort of violent assault in progress. And now we have to better prepare ourselves, playing out the situations in our head ahead of time before we actually get on scene. So that way we know if this is what I see when I get on scene, I need to act accordingly. If this is what I see or hear when I get on scene, now I need to change routes and do this a different way.
Getting a little more detailed, I know that you guys have body cameras here in the county, but what are some of those bigger safety risks that deputies have when actually, responding to a domestic violence situation? If you can be a little more detailed.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times people own firearms, so we don't know if it's going to be inside a house. Are there any firearms inside the house? Are there any weapons at all involved? Could be knives, could be a baseball bat, could be any type of weapon involved. The biggest thing that we're going to do is look out for our victim in the situation. We want to determine if there's a victim, if there's any injury or anything. And a lot of times when we see that victim, if they do have an injury, that helps us better prepare for what to expect from a suspect or anybody that may still be inside a location that we're unable to see.
I'm sure body language and, maybe there's some social cues that you guys look for when you guys arrive to some of these scenes. What are some red flags that you guys look to identify when responding to domestic violence calls?
A lot of times what we end up seeing is people are very high on their emotions. People have been going back and forth. There's arguing taking place. And we're hoping that when we get there, just our presence helps start calming people down. But unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes when we show up, that actually intensifies the situation. So we look for what's going on. If we see somebody in distress, we want to address the person that's in distress. But if there's somebody that's acting aggressively, we need to make sure that we address that too, because we don't want to cause further injury and we don't want them to injure anybody else that may be around. If it's happening inside a house and it's just two people, it's sometimes a little easier to control. If we're outside and it's happening in the public, we've got a lot more going on because we need to worry about not only the safety of the people that are involved, but the people that are out there nearby.
So you mentioned emotions. From your perspective, what do you see victims often struggling with most of the time when you arrive in these situations?
So a lot of times their emotions are running very high. They could be in some sort of emotional distress, and we need to address that. One of the biggest things is that victims usually feel guilt, and that guilt, they've been in a relationship with this person for sometimes a long time. They feel like that they could have prevented this and that it's their fault. And they also don't want to see their loved ones be in trouble. They just needed help.
Okay, with that, that's a good point, because what I wanted to say is balance. How do you balance enforcing the law, but also offering compassion and support to that victim in those real-time moments?
So it's actually pretty difficult sometimes. There are times where it's very cut and dry and the victims are very cooperative and say, yes, this is exactly what I want done. They know what they want. Not all victims are like that. A lot of victims don't want their loved one to be in trouble. So when it comes down to it, we go by the letter of the law. And we have to investigate the crime or a potential crime as what it is. If a crime has occurred, especially around domestic violence, we have a duty to act on that. But with that, we do provide resources to those victims to let them know, hey, you don't have to accept this. This doesn't have to be okay. You shouldn't have to think that what this person is doing is okay and you just overlook it. Any type of violence against another person is not acceptable. And I want to make sure that people understand that.
And one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet, which we're going to get into right now, is children. Because oftentimes, especially in suburbia communities, we deal with families, right? The Sheriff's Department deals with domestic violence calls that deal with families, just not spouses, correct?
Correct.
Or partners.
Absolutely.
So with that, what role do children play in the dynamics that you see during domestic violence calls when deputies respond to these type of things?
So when we arrive on scene, if we see that there's children there, they're obviously a high priority. We want to make sure that they're okay as well because they are victims in the situation as well. Even if they're not a physical victim, that they've been physically abused, they're hearing it, they're seeing it. And we want to let the kids know that everything's okay, that we're there to help them out, but also get them to understand that what's going on is not okay. And that it's not okay for this person to hit another person or whatever the situation may be. And it brings a whole nother factor in because now not only are we looking out for the victim of a physical assault, but we're looking for these other victims of an emotional abuse, essentially, by having to see it and be a part of it and live through that.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
Part of the reason why we're doing this episode on domestic violence awareness is to kind of educate our community and the public on, some of these processes that, in this case, the Sheriff's Department has to go through when they respond to these type of incidents. And one of the things that I have learned working in the news for so long is that one of the common things that you hear people say is, well, the cops didn't do anything, right? Like, they don't know, they didn't understand my feelings, they didn't even listen to me, etc. So I want to talk about training and approach. So how does the Sheriff's Department train deputies to respond to domestic violence incidents?
That is a great question. So our training on that starts day one at the academy. When we get accepted into the Sheriff's Academy, we go through some pretty rigorous training. One of the biggest parts of our academy is that it is a stress academy. So we're going to have our tactical officers yelling at us, putting us in tense situations, and we have to be able to handle that.
So wait, So the instructors actually yell at you guys?
Oh, yeah. They'll be sitting there. There's no foul language or anything like that. Nothing derogatory, but they're getting loud. They're yelling in your ear. They're near your face. They're close to you. They're in your personal space.
And like mentally, like, this is a training, right? But like mentally, does like your mind go there for a second? Like, oh my gosh, like this is affecting me.
Oh, absolutely. I remember my first day and having people yell at me and be in my face and tell me about my uniform not being correct and things that I had made mistakes on the first day, and I just have to stand there and accept it and deal with it afterwards. It sounds very odd, but the good thing about that is it prepares us for working out on the streets and dealing with people, because we come up on these situations where now one person is yelling at us just because we've shown up, and we need to be able to know how to keep our emotions in check and keep all of ourselves ready to go and focus on the work that we have to do. That person yelling at us is most of the time has nothing to do with us at all. It's just the fact that their emotions are high. They're letting out their anger and their frustration, and we need to not take it out on them that they're trying to affect us. We just need to keep ourselves in check, focus on the job at hand, and get it done.
Resources, because you guys are obviously a public service, right?
Yes.
What resources or partners, like advocacy groups, shelters, victim services, do you typically involve once you're on scene and you're assessing it?
So there are a handful of resources out there, both up in the high desert and down in our valley area, which is really helpful. I can provide those names and everything afterwards, so you can give that to your viewers as well.
Sure.
But basically, if we go on scene and there's a situation that we need to get somebody out of, we can contact those resources with the victim, which I've done before, and find them housing, find them some sort of shelter where they can go. The great thing about that for victims is that they can go there and it's anonymous. Nobody needs to know where they are. They're not going to tell anybody. We're not going to tell anybody, because we want to make sure that they're safe. And that's not only for just the physical victims, but also if there's kids involved, we're able to make sure that we have space for them. I actually remember a time where I had somebody a female with 2 children, had nowhere else to go, was afraid her husband was going to get right back out of jail and that the cycle was going to continue. Called a couple of our advocacy places. Unfortunately, everywhere was full at the time. We have a HOPE team that generally deals with our homeless outreach, and I know that they sometimes are able to offer housing, like temporary housing hotels for homeless. So I reached out to one of them. He said, absolutely, we can help out with that. We'll get her a hotel for her and the kids until a bed opens up at one of the other advocacy places, and it worked out really great, and they got the help that they needed.
Very good. I've talked to the sheriff a number of times over the years as far as like the ever evolving changes that come with law enforcement, right?
Yes.
Things that were done in the 90s or the early 2000s aren't necessarily the same approaches that law enforcement uses in the 2020s, right?
Right.
So I want to focusing on domestic violence. Have you seen changes since joining the force over the years in how law enforcement approaches domestic violence calls?
Oh, absolutely. There's a wide variety of things that we've had to look at. One is going to be our approach just for our safety, to make sure that we know what we're walking into. Like I said earlier, we could be walking into a violent situation. We want to make sure that we're safe, because if we're not safe and something happens to us before we even get to the scene, then we're not going to be able to help that victim. But even once we get to the scene, being able to be there emotionally for people and understand and give them empathy for the victims and for anybody involved, even the suspects. A lot of time giving the suspect of the crime a little bit of empathy will help calm them down and diffuse the situation so we can actually do our investigation. So I feel like just us being able to communicate better with people and find out the root of the issue and calm their nerves really helps us out a lot.
Interesting.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
This episode of Ramplify discusses domestic violence, a topic that may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Resources and support info are available in the podcast description.
We normally try and have like light episodes. This is probably one of the deeper, darker episodes that, we've covered, but domestic violence is something that, we cover because domestic violence awareness is important. That's a real part of our real world that we live in. Yes, you are a member of law enforcement, but you are a human being also. So I wanted to kind of cover the emotional and professional toll that it takes on someone like yourself as an individual, because you have been in law enforcement for a minute, right?
Yeah, just a few.
Just a few. So, for you, Mike, what's the most challenging part of handling domestic violence cases? Because obviously you shouldn't be taking your work home, but I'm sure there's been moments where, some were just a lot more worse than others.
Right. And it's pretty difficult. These people are going through all these emotions, and as a human being, you're taking some of those emotions. You're there trying to help, and just hearing their story and knowing the pain that they're in and what they're going through, it's difficult on us too. And we have to kind of take that and set it aside in the investigation, so that way we can help them and not project any of our feelings on what they're going through and make things worse.
I guess the decompression moment where you're in your vehicle and you're alone with your thoughts and you're driving home. What are those moments like? Like, how do you decompress from those calls that you had just taken,
It's a little bit difficult. It's going to depend on the situation, but there have been some rough calls where I've had to pull over and just kind of stop and take a breath and know hey, I did the best I could for this person. I have led them to a way that they can make their situation better. I only hope that they will follow that. And then I get to go home to my family knowing that I'm in a good situation and I'm happy with what I have. And that really brings a lot to me. So having a happy, healthy, supportive family at home means a lot to me because that helps me de-stress.
Community and prevention is something that I kind of want to wrap up the interview with you. What do you wish the public understood better about domestic violence? And you are more than welcome to address our audience directly if you feel like you need to. Mm-hmm. But specifically, what do you want to emphasize that you wish that they understood better about these type of things?
To be honest, domestic violence and any type of violence towards you does not need to be accepted. Reach out to people, reach out to friends, family, law enforcement, but thinking that it's okay is not okay. So get out there, say something, stand up for yourself. Law enforcement's here to help you. We don't want to judge. We want to go do the best that we can to help everybody in these situations. So we will absolutely listen to everything you have to say and take that and make decisions and help the victims get to where they need to be.
And then places like Victor Valley College or local organizations, what can we do to help prevent or respond to domestic violence more effectively?
Prevention is difficult, but having good rules in place, especially as the college, having policies, zero tolerance policies saying, hey, we don't tolerate any type of violence or domestic violence. And if we do find out that this is what happened, this is going to be what's going to happen. These are going to be the consequences. And following through with those consequences is actually huge because we sometimes re-victimize the victims by not following through. So if we say, hey, victim, this is what's going to happen if you're a victim of this crime, this is what's going to happen, and we don't follow through with that, they're getting re-victimized, and that's not fair to them.
And in closing, to wrap this up, if you could share one message with our listeners and viewers today about domestic violence and law enforcement's role specifically, what would that be?
Again, we're here to help. We're not here to judge you. We're not here to do anything to make you uncomfortable. We truly do want to make your situation better if we can. We'd love to be there for you. Just call us and we will be there at least to listen.
Mike, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here on Ramplify to talk about domestic violence. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Support for Ramplify comes from Victorville Cadillac, offering a selection of new and pre-owned Cadillac vehicles. More information about Victorville Cadillac's latest inventory is available at vvcadillac.com.
This episode of Ramplify discusses domestic violence, a topic that may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Resources and support info are available in the podcast description.
Hello once again. You're streaming Ramplify the podcast, brought to you by the Associated Student Body at Victor Valley College. I'm your host, Andrew Caravella, Media Relations Coordinator here at VVC. Also, thank you for watching exclusively through the free VVC mobile app. If you're on the go and listening to the audio version of the show, thank you for streaming on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app. Did you know that in the U.S., domestic violence isn't rare? According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, about 41% of women and 26% of men experience contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner at some point in their lives. That's tens of millions of people. That could be neighbors, friends, coworkers, or even a fellow classmate whose stories often go untold. The hotline says that nearly 3 in 10 women, 29%, and 1 in 10 men, or 10%, report having experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, with associated impacts on their daily functioning. And when we look at severe violence, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men report having experienced severe physical violence by a partner. We have today Jessica Bradley. She is a San Bernardino County Deputy District Attorney. She's been a deputy DA for the last 4 years here in the county, and she's going to talk to us about what happens when domestic violence cases go from law enforcement to the DA's office. It becomes a court case. So, Jessica, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your life to be here today to talk to our students and our community and the public about what it looks like when it gets to the DA's office. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for addressing this topic. As you just noted a few statistics, it is something that is happening all over the country, all over the world, and especially within our community. So thank you for taking the time to address this.
Sure, absolutely. I want to focus first on background and perspective. From the DA's perspective, what happens when a domestic violence case gets referred to the office?
You obviously have law enforcement goes out, right, to an incident. They take the report. They then submit that to our office. In our unit, that I work in, which is the Family Violence Unit, we prosecute crimes against children, elder abuse crimes, and domestic violence crimes. So that report would come to a deputy district attorney in our unit, and we review that report. We review the statements. We review the evidence. And our standard, essentially, in filing is, can we prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt? Do I, as a deputy district attorney, have a good faith belief that if I were to take this case to trial, I can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? And if it is yes, then we have an obligation to file that case, and then the court case does begin.
And then with those cases, the most common charges or offenses, like what do you usually see?
So the Penal Code actually has a specific charge for domestic violence. It's Penal Code Section 273.5. That is a felony charge, and it's technically titled corporal injury to a spouse, cohabitant, child's parent, boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. And so essentially that's when within a domestic violence attack, there's an injury. There's also lots of other charges and crimes that we come across in these types of cases, such as criminal threats, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon. And then the law also has a caveat for what we call a special allegation. And if someone is hurt in the manner that we call great bodily injury within a domestic violence relationship, that is an additional allegation that we can charge in addition to those other types of crimes.
How do you balance the need for justice with the safety and well-being of a victim in these cases?
It's a fine line that I think as a deputy district attorney, you have to remember and remind yourself of every day, right? So as a DA, our job is to, the first kind of caveat is to hold someone accountable, right? For what they've done, right? And secure a conviction for that based on what the evidence shows. The other caveat to that is community safety, right? Public safety. How do we do that in a way that ensures public safety? And then in these crimes in particular, how do we ensure the victim's safety, right? And every case is different. There's no cookie cutter of this is how I do my job across the board. As a DA, you have to analyze each case on a case-by-case basis. And I have a wonderful mentor who taught me very early on the phrase, know your victim, know your case. And so in order to balance both those factors, you have to know your victim, you have to know your victim's needs, you have to know where your victim is at in the cycle of domestic violence. Are they still stuck in it? Are they ready to get out of it? Where they're at? As well as balancing that you have someone here who the evidence shows is abusive and dangerous, and how do we hold them accountable in the proper way?
That's very interesting that you say that, because you said, are they ready to get out of it? Are they still stuck in it? Because oftentimes I think we see that in some of these instances, at least with the people that I've spoken to who are going through domestic violence or have come out of domestic violence. Like there's instances where it's a vicious cycle and they stay stuck in those relationships.
Absolutely.
When we talk about case processing, how does evidence like the police reports, medical records, or even like 911 calls play a role in decision making for you?
So all of that is evidence, right? And you want to evaluate your evidence, again, on a case-by-case basis. And one thing I tell a lot of people is it's not like Law and Order tells you it is. And so the movies and TV, when dealing with legal cases, everything kind of fits perfectly into a box, right? You have the reports, you have 911 calls, you have witnesses, you have DNA, you have potentially a weapon that was secured during a search or something like that. And every case is different. Sometimes you do have all those things. Sometimes you don't have all those things. And so again, the standard as a DA that I always have to keep in mind is, can I prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? That's my ethical obligation to the community. And what evidence do we have, and how are we going to put that together if the case does go to trial to secure that conviction?
I want to back up to that vicious cycle I was talking about, because the evidence, that all makes perfect sense to me. However, let's say you have all that, and let's say the victim doesn't want to testify. Can you still move forward with the case?
Yes. So in the state of California, well, let me back up again.
Okay, go ahead.
Back to what I was saying about TV doesn't always tell you everything, right? And so a lot of people watch TV, and it's very common in TV, and I always use Law and Order as an example, for a victim to say, well, I want to press charges, or I don't want to press charges. So in the state of California, the California Constitution actually gives the power to file charges or not file charges to the district attorney's office. So the short answer to your question is yes. We can move forward with a case even if a victim does not want to testify, or if a victim does not want prosecution, because if we have that good faith belief that a crime has been committed, then we have to pursue that and file those charges. And I always think of it also as, although it might not be recognized by the victim, that the state of California does that to help ensure a victim's safety, right? If a victim is still stuck in that cycle of abuse, right? It starts with you have the honeymoon phase and everything is great. And then you start seeing some red flags, but we all justify the red flags. And then it moves into that explosion phase, right? Or the act of violence. And then that's usually when the case comes to our office because something has been reported. And then as we're pursuing the case, if we have the evidence to do so, then you have also the potential where the abuser is now saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to change. I'm never going to do that again. I love you. I love our children. Let's try this again, right? And then you get back into that honeymoon phase. And so really the decision being given to the DA's office is to also help protect that victim. If they can't get out of that cycle, if they're still seeing things with those rose-colored glasses, we still have a duty to protect them. And we still have a duty to protect the community. And again, to hold someone accountable, whatever that looks like. It's a case-by-case basis on what the right thing to do is. But our goal is that community safety. And even if a victim doesn't want prosecution, that doesn't take away from the fact that we have evidence that this person is dangerous.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay, well, moving on with that then, victim support. How does your office work with victims during the process? And then what resources are available to them?
Yes, so again, community safety, community outreach is a huge goal and a huge priority in our office. So we have an entire department, our victim services department. And within that department, we have wonderful people that we call our victim advocates. And so when a case is filed, a victim advocate is assigned to that case. And they will be that person on that case with that victim through the filing to the disposition of the case, whatever that is, if it's a plea agreement or if it's a trial. And that victim advocate is there to offer support to the victim, whether that's in-person support in court, if the victim, because the victim has a right to be at hearings, at the court hearings. And so sometimes the victim advocate will sit with them during that court hearing. If the victim has to testify, the law allows for that victim advocate to sit on the stand next to them so that they have a person with them to support them, especially because I think you always have to remember testifying, they're testifying in front of their abuser, right? And potentially a jury of strangers. And so that advocate can be there. Another caveat is that our victim services department can offer, again, that case-by-case support. What does this person need? Is it relocation services? Is it help getting into a shelter? Is it food? Is it clothing for them and their children? Is it counseling, right? Is it just someone to talk to? Again, you have to meet people where they're at. So not all victims are ready for these types of services. Not all victims want that. But for those who are and who are open to it, our victim advocates truly do the miracle work on our cases in helping our victims get from start to finish.
This is Ramplify, the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
There are challenges, I assume, in your line of work. So when we talk about legal and community impact, what are some of those challenges that you face in the district attorney's office in prosecuting domestic violence cases?
I think one of the biggest challenges is understanding that, as lawyers, right, we view things from the legal perspective, right? We view the evidence from the legal perspective. But with these types of crimes, you have to be aware of the emotional perspective as well. These types of crimes are dealing with people who love each other. I always say two things can exist at the same time. So someone who is a victim of domestic violence can say, I know I need to get out. I know I deserve better, but I love this person. This person is a parent to my children. When they're good, they're good. And those two things can exist at the same time. So I think what can be complicated about these cases as the prosecutor is recognizing those two things. I will always tell a victim, I can never understand what you've been through because I don't. I haven't been through it. But I recognize that there are so many different facets to this. And I think the other thing is when you do have a victim who isn't ready to get out of that cycle, I, as the prosecutor, and I'm not sure if you could tell, I'm very passionate about these cases.
Yeah, no, I was vetting you before this, and I'm like, yeah, she's got passion about this.
And it's something, people being treated with respect and love and dignity is something that I'm very passionate about. And so as a prosecutor, you have to remember you can only meet people where they're at, right? I have a job to do. I have to make sure that I'm ensuring that community safety, right? That we're holding people accountable. And I want more than anything for these victims to see their worth and see that they deserve so much more. But you can only meet people where they're at. And so it can get difficult if someone isn't in favor of prosecution or they're not cooperative to, again, balance that line of ensuring their safety, community safety, as well as what does justice look like in this case.
You had mentioned earlier, like regarding cases, like, you know, they're to paraphrase, they're not the same. You know, each case is not the same. They're not cookie cut, I believe, is what you said.
Yes.
How does your office address repeat offenders or even high risk cases?
So that's a really great question. So the law itself addresses repeat offenders in a few different ways. So I'm not sure if you've heard of like a strike offense.
Like a 3-strike type of thing? Yeah.
Yes. So in California, certain offenses are what we consider serious and or violent crimes. And those are strike offenses. And so the law addresses that, where if someone has that in their criminal past, the repercussions and the penalty for new crimes is more severe. So the law also, when it comes to domestic violence, if someone has recent domestic violence convictions, again, based on the evidence, there's a chance that then their penalties will also be more severe. And I think in evaluating a case, right, if you have someone who is a repeat offender, right, who is very dangerous, maybe weapons are involved or things like that, you have to evaluate what is the right consequence for this, because there's a spectrum of consequences. Is it probation and classes? Is it jail time? Is it prison time, right? And so as the deputy district attorney on the case, you have to use your discretion for this person has shown they're very dangerous and the crimes that the evidence is showing they're committing are serious, then that consequence might be more severe.
One of the things in my time in journalism and in the news here in Southern California that I've covered is cases, you know, of all kinds, criminal cases that involve plea bargains.
Yes.
Yes. From the news perspective, I look at those as negotiations between the law and, the suspect. What roles do plea bargainings play in domestic violence cases, and how do you decide if it's appropriate? Because I kind of look at those as like, perhaps like a stalemate situation, or like, well, it's this or that, you know, so here's your plea bargain. You can do this so we can get through the case. Could you just kind of clarify what that looks like when we talk about plea bargaining? Yeah,
absolutely. So again, our goal in our office is to secure a conviction in the safest way possible. So again, it's that balancing. We go back to one of your first questions, is balancing justice with victim safety and community safety. And so that negotiation between, in my cases, it's myself and a defense attorney is, you know, based on the evidence, this is what I feel is appropriate to cover both justice and community and victim safety. And then the defense attorney will do their job as well in terms of, you know, no, can we come in here?
Like a counter.
Or yes.
Okay.
And so we do negotiate. And in those negotiations, I think you have to, again, try to recognize what is the best scenario for this specific case. And sometimes a negotiation can't be reached, and then someone has a right to a jury trial, which is their absolute right. And so then the case moves on to a jury trial. But again, if a plea can be reached and we're not subjecting someone to testify if they don't want to testify, or we're not going through the rigors of a trial or continuing the case on for potentially years, and we can reach that appropriate negotiation, that's when the plea bargain comes in hand.
So the one thing I thought you were going to say, but you haven't said yet, but I have it right here. So we'll talk about, and this is like the most common thing in conversations that I hear like the community talk about when we talk about like criminal cases and stuff, restraining orders, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, you got to get a restraining order on that person. So in your experience, what impact do restraining orders or protective orders have on preventing further violence?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because restraining orders are actually part of each and every case that we litigate with domestic violence cases. So the court calls them criminal protective orders. And there is a specific criminal protective order that relates directly to cases of domestic violence. And there can be no contact criminal protective orders. There can be protective orders that are no contact, that allow for peaceful exchange of children if necessary. There can be no negative contact criminal protective orders. So, and those criminal protective orders are something that our office takes very seriously.
So what happens, because I'm sure this happens, because we talked about vicious cycles, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if the restraining order for the person to protect, what if they break it and they have contact with the person they're not supposed, that the restraining order is to protect them against?
So I just want to make sure.
The victim.
So the victim is the one who reaches out,
who breaks the order,
to the restrained party. So when a judge is the one who issues these criminal protective orders in court, and most, if not all, of the judges that I've watched issue these actually warn of that caveat to the restrained person. This order is on you. You are the restrained party. So if the victim does contact you, it's on you to walk away, to hang up the phone, to cut that contact, right? Because you're the restrained party.
Are there consequences, I guess is what I'm asking, for the victim to break an order?
No, the consequence is on the restrained party.
I guess if the restrained party, reports it.
Right. But it's again, that criminal protective order, the duty on that order, the court order on that order is on that restrained party.
This is Ramplify the podcast at Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College. Victor Valley College.
Okay, and then a couple more questions. Community education and prevention. For all of you that are watching this, I think this is really important to understand. If you could speak directly to the public, what do you wish that the public could understand better about domestic violence cases in general?
That's a good question.
I feel like they're common, right? And I feel like if it's not us in our personal lives, we know someone,
yes,
at some point in our lives that fall under those categories of domestic violence.
Yes.
So what would you like the public to better understand about domestic violence?
I think I would ask the public in a simple phrase to listen more, judge less. Right. So every case of domestic violence, as we've kind of covered, is individual, right? There's no cookie cutter case to my files and my cases. There's no cookie cutter to domestic violence. This is real life. You're dealing with real people, kind of as we addressed with the criminal protective order thing, right? Everyone has the free agency to make their own choices. We can't control that. And so I wish the public could better understand that we're outside of that cycle. And so sometimes as a friend or a family member, you can see things for as they are, but the person who's inside of that cycle can't. And really, they don't need you to judge them, right? They don't need you to say, well, why didn't you leave? Well, you went back for the 7th time. What did you expect to happen? That's not what someone who's in the cycle of domestic violence needs. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. You can speak your piece, right? But they're going to do what they're going to do. And when they're ready, they'll be ready. But I think the best way to offer support as a neighbor, a friend, a family member is to be that trustworthy listening person, because often in the cycle of domestic violence, one of the things that abusers use to manipulate their victims is isolation. And so they isolate the victim to a point where then the victim believes all they have in the world is this one person. So they can't leave. And so they withstand the abuse because they can't leave. And so I think if, as community members, we just understood our role is just to not judge and to listen, right? To not let that person get isolated, to let them know, I'm going to meet you where you're at. And when you're ready, I'm here, whenever that is.
You answered a couple more questions, so I'm going to skip on those. Talking about isolation, prevent escalation, are there signs or patterns you'd encourage people to look out for that could help prevent escalation?
Absolutely. One of the things I was taught is if you see something, say something. Whether you're a neighbor, a friend, a family member, a classmate, whatever it may be, if you see something, say something. If you see something, report it, right? Because oftentimes, and again, no case is the same, but oftentimes domestic violence doesn't start with the severe abuse. It starts with the tiny things, right? It starts with one hit or, a few seconds of strangulation or one, violent push up against the wall, right? It's those tiny things. And then as that behavior is accepted, it does escalate. And so I think, again, as community members, if you see something, say something, because oftentimes, as you gave the statistics, those tiny things escalate into the big things, and then, God forbid, the very biggest things.
Jessica, I'm going to ask you a question from a more personal standpoint now. I know you've been speaking from lawyer world, from deputy DA world.
Yes.
But personally, what keeps you motivated to handle these cases? Because I'm like you said, none of them are cookie cut. They're all hard.
Yes.
But from the human standpoint, what keeps you motivated to keep handling these type of things?
Well, I think it goes back to, number one, I'm fortunate this is going to sound so cheesy and corny, but this truly is my dream job. I feel like the luckiest girl in the world to be able to serve our community in this way and to be a prosecutor and to fight for victims. And although nothing I do as a district attorney is about me, right? I go to work every day and I fight for other people. Why I do it is tied to my personal values and beliefs. And it goes back to what I kind of referred to earlier. I have a deeply rooted belief that every person deserves to be treated with respect, deserves to be treated with kindness, and deserves to be treated with love, especially in a relationship. Domestic violence, acts of domestic violence go against all of that. And so although I tackle my job on a professional level, the thing that keeps me going, right? Even when it gets hard, and it does. I'd be lying if I told you, it's not that bad, right? It gets difficult. Yeah. That is when you kind of have to check into that passion of why I'm doing this. And it's because, whether a victim realizes it with me or realizes it maybe down the road, there is so much more out there, and people deserve that kindness and that respect and that love. And I hope that each one of the victims that I come in contact with on my cases, no matter where they're at in that cycle, will one day realize that.
And last question, if there's one message you'd like to share directly with victims of domestic violence that may be listening or watching this podcast right now, what would that be?
I would tell them that you are not alone. This is not your fault. You don't deserve this. You didn't bring this on yourself. And there is help. When you are ready, whenever that may be, there truly is a community of people, a community full of services that are here to help you when that time comes.
Jessica Bradley is a San Bernardino County Deputy District Attorney. Thank you so much for talking today about domestic violence here in the County of San Bernardino with us on Ramplify.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
We'll see you next time right here on Ramplify. Later.
Ramplifi, the podcast, is filmed and recorded in Victorville, California. This podcast is made possible with the support of the Associate Student Body of Victor Valley College. The views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Victor Valley College or its affiliates. Ramplified is hosted by Andrew Caravella and produced by Robert A. Swool. The production crew includes officers of the Associate Student Body for the 2025-2026 academic year. Ramplified Season 2 gives special thanks to our sponsors, Victorville Cadillac, VVC's Welding Department, Joe and Cindy Monty, and Jacobo Vincecara. Podcast audio distribution made possible by KVVB Television. Additional sponsorship made possible through Lowe's Home Improvement in Victorville. I'm Social Science Senator Seth Cabello. For more information about this podcast, please contact info@vvc.edu.
Support for Ramplify comes from Victorville Cadillac, offering new and pre-owned Cadillac vehicles with financing options, including pre-approval available. More information about Victorville Cadillac's latest inventory is at vvcadillac.com.